Hello. Welcome, everybody. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I know it's a Sunday, but let's get it started. When I say people, you say power. People.
Power.
People.
Power.
One more time, as loud as you can. When I say people, you say power. People.
Power.
People.
Power.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the People's Forum today. Welcome to our event where we're demanding free, safe, legal abortions now. Justice is ours to make. Can everybody say that? 1, 2, 3. Justice is ours to make. Awesome. Thank you. We've chosen the title of this event very intentionally. We believe here that the people, the working people of this country, have power. We have democracy. We have justice. These are things that we already have, and we don't need anybody to tell us that we have these things. So welcome here. We're going to get started with our panel soon, but I just wanted to give a brief intro. So we all know, and we're all kind of, catalyzed by the fact that on June 24th, the Supreme Court rolled back the landmark decision of Roe v. Wade. Not good, bad. Yeah, thank you. But we know that this is not something that's been happening since then. It's been the ruling class has been organizing and strategizing against us since Roe was enacted. So this is a struggle that has been going on for decades and decades. And what we are here to talk about is how the rights of working people, not just the right to abortion, not just the right to reproductive justice, even though these are essential to our healthcare, to our human rights, our rights as working people are being eroded. And we need to come together across different struggles to be unified, to understand that our liberation is collective. It's tied to one another. You can't be free without me being free, and I can't be free without you being free. So thank you for coming today. We're going to get started with our panel. We have a panel discussion coming up. We're going to have Q&A afterwards, and then at around 3 o'clock, we're going to break into 3 activities. We have a screen printing activity where you can get 2 designs printed on either shirts or tote bags. We're going to have an open mic, so feel free to sign up for the open mic. And we're going to have a workshop. There will be somebody who will MC the open mic, and she'll get everybody sorted. And then after that, we're going to have a documentary screening of a movie called The Janes, which is a documentary about the Jane Collective. And then we're going to have a discussion afterwards. But I'm going to pass it off to my dear friend and comrade, Hannah, to talk about the exhibit and all the beautiful artwork that you're seeing today.
Thank you, Mia. So from the People's Forum, from the International People's Assembly North America, and from Capire, we're so excited to have this exhibition of amazing pieces of artwork that highlight the current struggle for abortion and envision a future of reproductive justice. I hope that many of you have had the chance already to take a look at some of these amazing posters. These works were made by artists from Havana, Caracas, Vancouver, Sao Paulo, Barcelona, Columbus, Oakland, Denver, Durham, rural Texas, Chicago, and our very own Flushing, Queens, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. That's an amazing list. So comrades from all over the world contributed to this historic and powerful exhibition that will continue to propel forward our internationalist struggle for reproductive justice. We know the extremely important role that art and culture play in our movements in transforming culture and building revolutionary optimism for a new world. And all of these artists have dedicated themselves to envisioning the present and future of struggle for justice. So many of the artists who are local to New York, the New York area, are here with us today. Let's give them a round of applause. And be sure to check out the entire exhibition today. There's this wall, and there's also all of these columns totally filled with artwork. So please enjoy. And just to remind everyone that as our movements for justice and for liberation continue to grow, art and cultural work will always play an extremely important role in our fights. So cheers to envisioning the future. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Claudia de la Cruz, who is the co-executive director of the People's Forum, an amazing organizer, cultural worker, and builder of people power all over the world. So I'm going to pass it off to Claudia.
Hannah likes to hype me up, and I like when she does it. How's everybody doing? Good? High energy, high morale, high discipline, high morale? All right, familia. So I literally just got back from a trip to Cuba. So I'm just literally coming from the airport. And I was thinking a lot about this event while I was there, mainly because Cuba has been discussing the family code, which is a reaffirmation of different types of families, the reaffirmation of women's rights over their bodies, and coming from a place that self-denominates itself as a democratic place, being in Cuba puts forth the reality that we live in the most undemocratic, the most profit-driven, and the least human-centered society we could potentially speak about, and that is the United States of America. I think it's important for us to raise in this context, in the context of today's event, that the attack on women's right to choose whether they have an abortion or not is not simply an attack on reproductive justice, is an attack to the working class women and birthing people all over this country. We're talking about the United States of America right now. And we're talking about the US precisely because we have so-called leaders who like to talk about undemocratic processes all over the world in relationship to Cuba, in relationship to Venezuela, in relationship to China. And what we're saying is that the United States needs to get their act together. And that the ballot has been pushed as the vehicle for the working class to make changes. And we have historically learned that that is not the case. That neither the Republicans or the Democrats give a damn about working class people. And it has been under Democrat ruling that the working class have been hurt the most. That wars have been started across the globe. That trillions of dollars have been placed in attack of working class people in the United States and again, internationally. And so we hope that with this event, with this panel, we're able to shed some light on how necessary it is to do cross-sectoral work, meaning that we need to break from these questions about immigrants do work here, Black people do work here, LGBTQ folks do work here, but we need to come together and we need to build a unified movement, build on principle, and build on the clarity that politically, as a working class, we have no other option but a revolution in this country. And we cannot expect politicians to give it to us. We have to take it. And with that, I want to welcome you all to the space. So give yourselves a round of applause. And I want to welcome our panelists. We have, so this is how we're going to do it. We have obviously 4 amazing human beings in this panel, plus me. Plus me. And we have someone who's zooming in, who will be doing much more of a legal analysis of what the situation is. But first, we want to show a video on a network of women who are working out of Mexico, and they're called Las Libres, the free ones. We thought it'd be important for everyone here not only to get a domestic understanding of what's happening around the issue of reproductive justice and abortion rights, but also get a sense of what people are doing internationally. I don't know if folks know about the struggles in Argentina or folks know about the struggles in Chile, but they are speed light far, far, far from where we are today. Again, as we claim to be the democracy, as a model for the entire world. You have countries in the global south that are leading the way and teaching us how it's done. And so Las Libres is also, and they'll talk a little bit about what they do, is also a model for us to learn from and see how we can make connections. And without further ado, David, who's back in the booth. Everybody say hi, David.
David.
David make things run here. All right.
Somos una organización feminista que desde hace 22 años trabajamos por los derechos de niñas, adolescentes y mujeres.
Nosotras, junto con otras redes de acompañamiento de México, hemos creado la red transfronteriza para acompañar y construir esta solidaridad internacional. Eso es muy importante, quitarle la carga, todas las cargas negativas que tiene el aborto. ¿Por qué? Porque la justicia es nuestra, está en nuestras manos.
En este caso, Estados Unidos ahora ha tenido un retroceso y es por eso que Las Libres y México está apoyando para que todas las mujeres sigan ejerciendo su derecho.
Si bien existen limitaciones de lenguaje, no han sido un límite como tal para que nosotros podamos compartirles y apoyar a estas redes. Es por ello que las chicas de Estados Unidos se comunican con nosotros a través de mensajes, llamadas telefónicas,
para que todas las mujeres, independientemente de las decisiones de los gobiernos, puedan acceder a un aborto seguro.
Y bueno, seguimos trabajando para poder que ellas y todas podamos acceder a esta justicia social que tanto hemos trabajado y tanto hemos luchado.
All right, familia. So those were Las Libres. We have that small clip, but I'm sure we could share with you where we obtained it from and maybe share the clip as well. But I want to go ahead and introduce the first speaker, and I'm going to introduce each speaker when it's time for them to share with us. I'm very privileged and honored to, again, be on this panel with 4 amazing human beings. The first person that I want to introduce and have her share a little bit with us is Karina Garcia, who is an educator. She is a friend. She is a mother. She's been doing the work around reproductive justice for over a decade. She's a popular educator, and she's also part of the Central Committee of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. So please welcome Karina Garcia.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Claudia. I'm very honored to be here and happy to see you all here. In this presentation, I want to focus on something that's a little bit new. It speaks to where we are, and it speaks to the nature of what's coming. So at Breaking the Chains, we believe that we are entering a period that constitutes a very sharp break from what we've been experiencing recently. We don't know what the outcome will be, but it will certainly have revolutionary potential. But it will also have a very reactionary and fascistic potential. And so we have to be really clear and really honest about that too. It's an undecided moment because we have only begun to struggle, but it's coming. So the Supreme Court decision that ends the constitutional right to abortion, that has to be understood in its full scope. First of all, this fundamentally important right, the right to decide about whether or when to become a parent, to make decisions about your health, about your body, about your future, and including the right to safely end a pregnancy. This right has not only existed in the books for the last 50 years, but it also enjoys the support of the vast majority of the population and the vast majority of women. And yet, the Supreme Court did it. Even though the majority of the country did not want this to happen, they went ahead and they did it. The most important thing to understand is that from their point of view, they have succeeded in doing something really extreme. And it was a direct and frontal assault on the majority of the population, but they succeeded. 6 individuals, 3 of whom were appointed by Donald Trump, succeeded in eviscerating the legal right to abortion for women and all those who need abortion, including non-binary people and trans men. Why did they do it? Yes, we know that they're right-wing religious lunatics, but this was part of a larger agenda, and we're all here to talk about that too, right? by basing the decision on the notion that abortion rights didn't exist in the original Constitution, what the Supreme Court of the United States is doing is they're deciding that the only real law of the land is the original Constitution. And that's why we have to do what Comrade Claudia was talking about, bring all of our struggles together, because that's the way that they're thinking. That's the way that they're organized. And that's the way that we're going to be organized too. But the difference is we have the vast majority of the population with us. That's the difference. We're not all organized and we're not all on the same page yet, but that's where we're going. And that's the purpose of this convening. So I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for being here. And I know that we're going to all get to know each other a lot better as we fight for our future. Because none of us here, anybody who came here on a Sunday, you are exactly the kind of person that we need. The kind of person that's saying we're not going to give up, that we're going to fight, that we're not going to let this little tiny group of billionaires determine and destroy our futures and our families. We're not going to let that happen. So yes, give yourself a round of applause. We can have a little energy. Yes, that's the kind of energy that we're going to need, and that's what we have. We have that already. We've shown it time and time again in the struggles against police brutality, in the struggles for LGBTQ liberation, the struggles for a better wage, the struggles for immigrant rights, all of these different struggles, but we've been isolated. Now we have to really come together. So according to them, the amendments that came later, the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment, voting rights, LGBTQ rights, marriage equality, all of that are on the chopping block. In 1910, the number of Black people who could vote in Mississippi was 2%. That was before the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which is not part of the original Constitution. But Black people made it a part of the Constitution. And they did it alongside with progressive, radical, revolutionary people who saw that struggle as important and fundamental to liberation in this country. They made it a part of the Constitution. And that's where we're going to learn from our comrades in Chile, too, who are also changing their own constitution. So these little right-wingers are trying to change the Constitution to fit their purposes, but we need to organize our people to change it for our purposes, to go forward and expand democracy, not to go back. The idea that the Environmental Protection Agency, another case that they recently decided, that they don't have the right to limit emissions, and that the government does not have the right to regulate business. That also is not in the original Constitution. The main issue that's being debated now in the Moore versus Harper, which is scheduled for a hearing in October, this case is very important. We have to pay very close attention to what happens in this case. This is about a gerrymander that conflicts with the North Carolina Constitution. But the issue that's at the core of this debate is what is being called the Independent State Legislature Doctrine. Raise your hand if you've heard about this. Okay. So the Independent State Legislator Doctrine literally gives state legislatures the power to pre-rig or simply hand over the elections to the candidate of their choice. The independent state legislator theory was first invoked by 3 conservative U.S. Supreme Court justices in the Bush versus Gore case that handed the 2000 election to George W. Bush. Now, I'm all looking into this stuff now. I didn't remember all this stuff, but we're following it now because it's affecting us, right? So technically, in that case, Bush lost the election, but the Supreme Court appointed him anyway in a 5-4 decision that ruling that the individual citizen has no federal constitutional right to vote for electors. That's what they decided. In that case, there were 3 SCOTUS justices, Rehnquist, Scalia, and Clarence Thomas, who is now the senior-most member of the court. They cited the independent state legislator doctrine to give Bush the presidency, even though he lost the popular vote, and therefore the electors of the state of Florida. And now, Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas, has been using the exact same argument to encourage the attempted coup on January 6th. I'm actually going to read the Constitution, the section of the Constitution that these right-wingers are trying to use to eviscerate the power of the popular vote. And I want to say, too, that before recently, I couldn't care less about the Constitution, this document that was written by a bunch of slaveholders, by a bunch of colonial elites who were responsible for the genocide of Black people, Native people, and poor people. So I didn't care about this document before, but because that's where they're focused, that's where we got to focus too, right? So here we go. Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution. Thank you. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress. In other words, the state legislature can pick the electors. This is what the right-wing justices are really positioning themselves for in the 2024 elections. They are ruling that case in 2023. And if we remember, Trump made this argument over and over again when he claimed that the vote was rigged. And he insisted that the state legislators should be able to appoint their own electors despite the popular vote. The Supreme Court now is going to be deliberating on this very notion, the issue whether state legislators will be able to decide who the electors are or whether the popular vote will continue to decide the electors. So this is going to happen next year. So I know I haven't talked that much about abortion rights right now, but we see what they're really gunning for. So why are they taking this case now? They're taking it because they want to change the form of government of the United States. The right wing of the Supreme Court is the tip of the spear of the right wing vanguard in this country. And the right wing of the ruling class understands very well that their power is slipping. The country has changed. There are too many Black people, Latino people, young people who will not vote for Republicans, and they can no longer win national elections. Those are just facts. Remember, Trump had 73 million votes. He had one of the highest votes of Republican candidates in many, many years, and he still lost the popular vote to Biden, of all people, right? So they understand this. They understand this. And so since they can't win, just like the rules exist, they want to change the rules. And they want to do it before it's too late. So they want to change the rules so that Republicans can dominate into the future. Because they now control 30 state legislatures, and this could be their last window to do it. So they're taking a real offensive against the American people right now. And they're playing a dangerous game. January 6th, in retrospect, could be seen as a dress rehearsal for the kind of institutional coup where the Supreme Court empowers a right wing to constitutionally ignore the popular vote in the states where they lose. So just think about the implications of that for a moment. What that would trigger, the crisis in big cities, the level of mass action and civil disobedience, the questions that that puts before the police and the mayors, the governors, the military, and how it can empower the far right. The whole system will be seen as illegitimate to millions of people, huge numbers of people, hundreds of millions of people who've been told their entire life that they live in a democracy, that one person, one vote. So it's clear that we've been entering into a new period of global politics, but we are entering into a new period of domestic politics too. And I know it seems a little bit crazy to think about it, but that's how fast politics can change. So these struggles for democratic rights have immense revolutionary potential. The idea that the right-wing legislators can decide who will receive the electoral vote in their state, the people of the United States are not going to accept that. They're not going to accept that. Women are not going back. LGBTQ people are not going back. Black people are not going back. Latinos are not, the people are not going back. And so we have to pay close attention to what happens in the Moore case. The implications are very far-reaching, and this could in fact create a self-acting movement once again. And we've seen that. We've been a part of that, right? So we know the potential of the movement, but we gotta be organized. And the movement's gonna involve people with lots of different politics, and it's gonna be a struggle to defend democracy. But for us, we can't just be about defending the system as it exists. That's the program of the Democratic Party. We want to expand what democracy actually is so that it includes economic rights, so it includes social rights. We know that one side of the party tries to hold us hostage, the other one attacks, good cop, bad cop. One side attacks us, and then the other side holds us hostage till November, right? The perpetual fight that they have. We have to be a third force. We have to expand this democracy. Instead of using our massive resources and technology to fund new wars and billionaire vanity projects, we could use those resources to meet people's needs, to do the things that actually matter, to support people who are living and breathing in this country, and beyond, actually. So with that, our demands just have to be better than a new president. We're so past that. We need a new society. We need a new system for the people and the planet to survive. Capitalism must end. Thank you.
Hold up. I got excited. Forgot to turn my mic on. So that was Karina Garcia. Give her another round of applause. Thank you so much for contextualizing and connecting the dots in terms of what is at stake and also what is possible if we as a people unite. The next speaker is Janiece Fountain from Yellowhammer Fund, and she is a grassroots organizer in Birmingham dedicated to the reproductive justice, direct aid, and reparations for Black communities. Give it up for Janiece.
No justice?
No peace.
No justice?
No peace.
No justice?
No peace.
Hey y'all, my name is Janiece. I'm the executive director of Yellowhammer Fund, which is funny because I was about to say family justice. I'm like, wait, got a promotion. I'm gonna start differently than I would usually would. Usually I come on and talk about access and remind people that, hey, low income people can't afford abortions, or low income people can't get them still while it was legal, right? I come on and say, Black people still can't get this shit because we can't afford it. We're still deciding between food and gas, much less going to get a procedure. And I add that some of my disabled friends are on medications that mean they can't take the medical abortion medication. People don't want to hear that shit. They're like, well, they'll be fine. Queer and trans folks don't want to go places because they can't be affirmed in their gender. They have to decide whether they want to stand in their true selves or get a fucking abortion. Meanwhile, white people are like, it's legal. We're all going home. That's our problem. And that's usually my soapbox, clearly, but I'm going a different route this time. I want to talk about what Yellowhammer Fund did pre-Roe, because I'm in Alabama, and what we're doing post-Roe. Pre-Roe in Alabama was very much so a hellscape. We were dealing with folks trying to get abortions to leave domestic violence. We were dealing with folks that were literally hungry, making these calls because, hey, this is going to be twice as bad for me now as a single parent. We were trying to get people that can only get to one appointment from Birmingham to Atlanta, because despite what people think, like, we didn't have abortion clinics in Birmingham pre-Roe anyways. Planned Parenthood wasn't doing abortions. They're only doing some amount of like birth control, I believe. And so you had to go to Tuscaloosa, Huntsville, or Montgomery. That's 2 trips. You had to wait 24 hours, come back again. That's not feasible for most people, especially low-income people, especially single Black parents. We're taking people to Atlanta, and we're pulling up in Atlanta with literally, I forgot his last name. His name is Jason. He burned down an AME church. We're pulling up to Jason telling us, yes, Black lives don't really matter, while we're trying to get medical attention, right? So that's what we're dealing with in the very southern states. And now post-Roe, I think the movement has really decided to try to forget that Alabama exists, since we don't have abortion clinics or those rights right now, or that access. And that's like the complete wrong thing to do. What we have been hit with at Yellowhammer with Roe falling is 7,500 orders for emergency contraceptives. 7,500 for a team of 5 people to get out to 7,500 people. People are panicking. And the very much realization of this is, while we're still going to try to do that radical work of seeing how people can get to care, the realization is this means forced pregnancies, this means forced parenting, and we have to also come in on that end. We can't just say, oh, well, you can travel to 7 different states that are nowhere close to you and still get an abortion. The reality is we have to support people on the birthing end too. Some people are gonna become parents that don't wanna become parents, and we have to do something about that also. And then in Alabama, we're like top 2 for poor states. Yeah, right behind Mississippi, least educated. We have like 1 in 5 people going to sleep hungry every night. This is going to be twice as bad without abortion access. We're looking at abortion being 40% of abortions are from Black women, which is also like the bigger percentage of people enrolling in school. So we're talking about something changing the whole trajectory of Black women's lives, Black queer and trans folks' lives. And this is the same state that has not expanded Medicaid, has not done shit for its people. This is us putting up 24-hour pantries in a city that took it with a crane and disposed of a free 24-hour food pantry that did nothing to no one. It was metal. They took it and removed it. This is a state that's starving us and also serving as a roadblock to any amount of liberation acts that we make for ourselves. So I just really want to point to that, because I think people are like, oh, well, let's forget about Alabama because we can't worry about them. You know, they don't have abortion clinics and it's illegal there. And that's the absolute wrong thing to do. Like, we're still organizing in Alabama. We still haven't given up the fight on abortion. We're just also being realistic and really getting on the street and saying, okay, we know this means forced pregnancy. We know this means a lot more people have a lot more issues that are going to intersect now. How can we try to tackle everything at once and let people know we're still here for them? That requires support, and that requires money, y'all. What else did I write? Once again. Also in Alabama, we are like as myself as a Black woman and other parents, we're more likely to be surveilled by the state. We're very much so victims of stigmatized as services. So these babies that they want us to have, they're gonna drug test us and not tell us that we're being drug tested. We're twice as likely to have our children removed from our homes. The number is, wait, I wrote it down. I think 500,000 in the US are removed from their homes, and 40% of that number is Black folks, and we make up 13% of the population? Very obvious that we're victims of very stigmatized as services. They're gonna take these kids that they wanted and put them in different homes and pay those folks to take care of these kids instead of assisting us in taking care of them, or leaving us with our reproductive agency so we can get abortions when we need them also. So that's my soapbox. I had a whole speech also, but Delta lost my luggage, so had to kind of wing it, but I think that's it.
Will you teach me how to wing it? Yeah. I'm just saying. Thank you, Janiece. Thank you for reminding us that when we're talking about the fight to access free, legal, and safe abortions, we're talking about the fight and struggle for our lives, for the defense of our lives, and about solving issues that are produced by the economic system in which we live, which are poverty, hunger, displacement, homelessness, and many other issues. So we want to welcome our next speaker, Kai Williams, artist, educator, queer, trans-masculine organizer, and historian. Welcome, Kai.
Peace, everybody. My name is Key Williams. I use they, he pronouns. And I think, I just want to start off by just being grateful for being invited to this space. Being grateful to yield my voice as a Black, queer, trans-masculine person who in the future is hoping to build a family, right? And have children, whatever that process may look like, because we don't know yet. And really, I think I'll start off a little bit, just talking a little bit about myself and my background. I don't have much to say. I'll probably cap it real soon. I'm a Cancer baby, and though I've been organizing for a very long time, I'm still very sensitive and shy behind the mic. But my organizing started with Black Lives Matter, right? As a founding member of Black Lives Matter, the global network, and our chapter, New York City chapter, we left the network in 2018, and my work then transitioned more towards centering abolitionist work as an organizer, combating the building of new jails in New York City, advocating for the closure of Rikers. We know that right now in New York City, right, there is this ideal, I don't know if folks have heard about the feminist jail that they want to build right at the top of Central Park in Harlem. There's this belief that the only way to close Rikers is to build new jails, which we know is completely false. And I talk about all of these different streams of work, and I mentioned also that I'm a historian, and really my work as a historian has focused on the existence of Black people in this place, which is Lenape-Hokan land, right? But in this place that we now call New York, which was once called New Amsterdam, and Black folks were bought here in 1625 as slaves, right? And we built up Manhattan and eventually moved up to other neighborhoods, right? Harlem, for example, that folks call a Black Mecca, was a Black Mecca because folks were fleeing violence that they were experiencing in southern Manhattan, not just the South. And so in terms of when we talk about free, safe, and legal, as Black people, there is definitely a legacy and a history there that we're familiar with in terms of having to advocate for those rights continuously. And so I appreciate, what the first two speakers are bringing in terms of what does it mean for America to call itself a democracy and be the least democratic. And I appreciate you for breaking down what we're looking at in terms of a fight legally moving forward. I remember the week that the Supreme Court hearings came out was kind of what I've been calling political whiplash, right? Of just like, you turned your head left, it was coming this way, turn your head right, it was coming that way. For me, June 24th, just 4 years ago, was same-sex marriage had become legalized. Like that was the day, it was the day before my birthday. Now the day before my birthday is Roe v. Wade rights were taken away. So political whiplash is something that we're experiencing in this country because the conservative right have been organized, and this is not something that they were able to do just 1 year or even 4 years. They have been fighting towards this for decades, And I think as an organizer who entire fight is towards liberation, is that what we're seeing is, yes, political whiplash, but also a backlash to the browning and the blackening of this country, right? That, let's not forget that the entire Stop the Steal effort is because they want to invalidate the votes of Black people in the South. That's where Stop the Steal comes from. It's not this, electoral college political game. It's like, your votes don't count because you're not technically a citizen, because this document that we want to refer to in 1796, my history nerd stuff, but we want to refer to doesn't name these things. And I think about places like Haiti, who's had 23 constitutions. So if we're going to refer to the original constitution, maybe it's time for America to have a new constitution, if that's where we're going. I think about all of those things but to go back to this particular topic. One of the things is that, New York City is one of those, New Jersey, those sanctuary states or sanctuary cities that we think of where folks are able to come here and receive the treatment that they need, not naming the fact that there are people in these cities and states that also need this treatment. And speaking personally, as much as I can personally speak, the impact of having people from other states having to come to New York City or New Jersey to receive treatment is impacting lives here as well. So it's not something where you can kind of bust away your issues or fly away your issues, right? But I also want to acknowledge that I'm at the same time frustrated. I'm very proud of the rapid response that people have been able to yield and give to our fellow citizens, fellow countrymen, right, in terms of abortion funds, in terms of folks literally asking, do you have flight points to donate so that people can get on a plane to come somewhere to receive services? But as Black, queer, trans person and non-binary people, part of what it is the system is just basically eating at itself in a way that's not sustainable. And I've just been really thinking about the words that we use, in terms of, justice, right? Like actually giving the fact that like these words matter, language matters, right? And so when we are advocating for these rights, it's like it's bigger than what you see, right? Clarence Thomas has already hinted at what he's coming for next, or what they're coming for next. And it's no longer you have to guess in the dark. They're really blatant, openly saying what type of violence they would like to enact on Black people, on brown people, on poor people. And it's just, it feels, sometimes it can feel really overwhelming to exist in this world. And the only thing that does kind of keep me having hope or seeing a future for us is when I see people like my Black trans male comrades who have babies, who have children, who are giving birth, and who are making more of a display of their families and their love ships. And so I would lovely like to shout out, if folks don't know or aren't familiar with organizer in the South, Kazembe Murphy Jackson, who is now openly speaking about having an abortion and what it meant to be a Black trans person who was raped in the South and had to go have a procedure that cost $300, and $300 for Black trans folks, that's something you don't budget for. One, we're never budgeting. Nobody should ever have to budget for harm, but it could be a Metro card or an abortion. That tiny, what can seem as a tiny fee for most, is a huge cost for others, And so talking about the ways in which Kazembe has many pieces where they're talking about navigating that space and navigating needing abortion and what that meant, that was really life-saving. Like these services are life-saving services in so many different ways. I think about Kaden Coleman, who has a lovely, beautiful girl that we've been able to watch grow up. Being able to see your friends' kids grow up is just remarkable. But people are also navigating raising children and finding themselves as Black queer individuals, as Black trans people, and that there's more to this. There's more to the life experience of our people than just what we're seeing now. But I think it's important, and I keep looking over here because I'm like, these words, free, safe, and legal, just speaks the volumes of what we're actually advocating for, which is a larger conversation around, again, America not being a democracy and us actually having access to the basic needs for people to live, survive, and sustain themselves. As abolitionist organizers, we're always advocating, saying, we don't want you to just be able to survive. We want you to be able to thrive, right? We want you to be able to have everything in life that you possibly need. And right now, America seems to be incapable of caring for any of its people. And yes, reproductive justice, falls into women's rights, but we're talking about bodily autonomy. We're talking about what does it mean to have families broken up. We're talking about displacement. We're talking about the over 200 bills that have been introduced, right? Agitating and antagonizing trans people across this country. It's just the layering on of all of these different issues. I think as organizers, what you spoke about us working together, is that there has to be some basic level of alignment as to what we're advocating for, where we're going, and that we won't leave anybody behind. And so at some point, we have to put aside, whatever the issue beef is. I think that we get so caught up in this is this type of dynamic and this is this type of issue. And once we start to work more intersectionally and towards liberation, and just agree that our vision, where we want to get to, is a world of liberation, I think for me, that's my entry point. It's you working towards liberation, I'm working towards liberation, let's get to work. That's kind of the bare minimum of where I'm at, because there's that level of sense of urgency for folks to be able to get to where we need to get to, but we have to do that together. We have to do that together. And so I'm just constantly envisioning, what does justice look like for us? What does justice look like for you? And how do we get there? But yeah, I'll peace out on that. I said short, and I'm that's 11 minutes, homie.
worthwhile 11 minutes, Kay. Thank you so much for sharing with us the sense of urgency, the need for developing community strategies, and for raising up models of how that could look like. Why are you looking at me like that, though? You know you're next. All right. All right, so let's welcome Rachel Lorenzo from Indigenous Women Rising. Rachel is a queer parent of 2 and lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Is your time?
Hello? Hello? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Yeehaw. Goatsi hopa hinome breka hapani washti e yaka hanu. My name is Rachel Lorenzo. I'm from the Pueblo of Laguna, the Mescalero Apache tribe, and also Chicana. Born and raised in New Mexico. That's my land. That's where my people come from. And I'm so proud of the desert and where I come from. Before I go anywhere else or say anything else, I want to acknowledge the original people who stewarded this land: Abenaki, Cayuga, Erie, Laurentian, Mohawk, Mohican, Munsee, Oneida, Onondaga, Puspatuk, and Seneca, Indigenous relatives. Keep in mind all of the sacrifices that they have made with their culture, their language, their children, their families, their communities, in order for us to be here in this city. And if it rains today or any day it rains, thank Native people, because that's our jam. So for Indigenous Women Rising, it started because I needed an abortion and I was denied care and I could have died. And we know that a lot of the people who have abortions are already parents, and I already had my daughter, and I wanted to stay alive for the daughter that I already had. I've been pregnant more than twice, and I have 2 children, and I am grateful that I ended up getting the care that I needed, but it shouldn't have to be that hard to get just basic health care. We hear a lot of terms like pro-choice or the choice to have an abortion. For my people, abortion is not always a choice. It's not a choice if you're being coerced. It's not a choice if you're having to make decisions between food and gas and basic health care. That's not a choice. So within Indigenous Women Rising, we refrain from using that terminology, pro-choice, because again, our people still don't have a choice. And even before Roe was never a reality for us. And while we were expecting it to fall at some point, it was the bare minimum. It was the absolute bare minimum that can guarantee us a legal right. And from our perspective as Indigenous people who experience the direct harms of colonization every day on our land, we don't see these governments as legitimate, because it was bought and paid for with my culture and my language and the future of Indigenous communities, and also paid for with the enslavement of Black people. And how our struggles, we're here talking about how these struggles are intertwined, and there's so much anti-Blackness within our own Indigenous communities that's something that we are trying to get our communities to understand when we're talking about Black Lives Matter within our own communities, that our struggles, they don't look exactly the same, but they are so similar. And that might not seem like it's related to abortion access, but we experience a lot of the same criminalization that Black folks experience. And Dorothy Roberts wrote in Killing the Black Body about the heavy surveillance of Black mothers in particular, and how the decisions that Black mothers make to just make sure that their children are housed and educated are so heavily criminalized. And my comrade brought up the high rates of children being separated from their families. Before the Supreme Court currently, there's a case called the I forget what it's called, but it's about the Indian Child Welfare Act. We had to literally legislate in the 70s to get the government to stop pulling Native children from their families. The Indian Child Welfare Act guarantees that if Native children are going to be separated from their families, that at least leave them in the same community that they come from. It wasn't until 60 years ago that it became illegal to literally stop selling Native children from Catholic schools to white families. My grandmother, my mom's mom, Evelyn Robinson from Mescalero, New Mexico, is the oldest of 10, and her youngest sister was sold to a white family so that way her parents could be able to feed the children that they already had. No family should be making that decision ever, especially on stolen land. And that's reproductive. That's a reproductive justice issue. Roe v. Wade isn't just about abortion. It's about our right to privacy. And from an Indigenous perspective, this is a tribal sovereignty issue. This is one way that this fascist, illegitimate government has been chipping away at tribal sovereignty for centuries in order to exploit our land and our natural resources. There is a reason why Indigenous people are the original stewards of the land. We are the original climate justice advocates on this continent because we knew exactly how the seasons worked, why they worked the way they did, and we helped each other with every medical ailment out there, whether it was abortion or giving birth or mental health things, arthritis, a bad back. We had everything we needed in our environment to help us take care of ourselves. And we, even after our families have been genocided, we continue to share our resources with everyone we can because this land is, we want you to, everyone here, however we got here, to be able to reap the rewards of what our land has to offer us, and that includes medical treatment at no cost. And when we're talking about safe abortions and safe healthcare, we're not just from our perspective, we're not just talking about abortions in a clinical setting. We're also talking about self-managed abortions, and not just self-managed abortions with the pills, but also using Indigenous knowledge, which is coming back. We are starting to reclaim those methods in which we take care of ourselves because we have that knowledge, and a lot of the Western medical system is based off Indigenous knowledge. Everywhere you look around you, you are on stolen land. Every aspect of our lives is because of Indigenous contributions. Even the United States government is based off the brilliance of Indigenous people in this state who call this state their ancestral homeland. And so in this movement, we would be remiss to leave out Indigenous people and our knowledge, even if it might not be grounded in the books that we see on the shelves, which are very important works to our movement and to organizing. But we can't get free without Indigenous people and our knowledge of our land. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel, for reminding us where we are standing and also the remnants of colonialism and slavery, which ultimately are the payment for, or the first payment towards capitalism as we know it. And so we have our dear last speaker who's on Zoom, David, and this is Mara Verjaden Hilliard. She is from the Partnership for Civil Justice Fund. She is a constitutional rights lawyer and executive director and co-founder of the Partnership for Civil Justice Fund. So let's welcome Mara. You could look at the screens that are next to you and you'll be able to see her as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mara Verjaden Hilliard. I am really honored to be here, and it has been amazing to listen to everyone who has spoken already, really raising the most critical issues that we're facing right now, and also laying out a path forward. And I think echoing some of that, I think it's crucial that we understand the place that we're in right now in order to forge that path, as folks have been talking about, and understanding what this court is doing with the decision in Dobbs to eviscerate abortion rights, but also understanding what that means in the larger perspective of what the court is doing and what the right wing is attempting to do in the United States. The decision in Dobbs to destroy abortion rights, a fundamental right that has been legally recognized for a half century, one would think it would be such an over-the-top, extreme effort that it couldn't possibly stand. And yet they did it. And they did it, and they feel good about it, and they feel that they succeeded. And because they feel they succeeded with something so extremist, they are absolutely looking at every other opportunity to roll back legally recognized rights that are inherently ours, but legally recognized rights so that they can criminalize us, so they can criminalize liberation. And that's what they're trying to do. They are going to be looking at affirmative action, anti-discrimination laws, voting rights, fundamental principles of democracy. And across the board, I think we can anticipate what they're going to do each step of the way. And where does that leave us? As we look at the Supreme Court, I mean, all of us who grow up in the United States, going to school in the United States, we have our pillars of democracy and our wonderful Supreme Court with these brilliant people in robes who issue neutral decisions based on their incredible knowledge, Ivy League generally trained as to what the law says, what is the law. And here you have an opinion where Justice Alito was repeatedly referring to Matthew Hale as the erudite, as the great thinker, the great legal mind that set forth the history of law when we look at the history of a right to an abortion and access to abortion and use of abortion as a medical procedure. And Matthew Hale, as I think many folks may know, and for those that don't, I mean, this is a judge from the 1600s. So we are now in 2022 with the Supreme Court of the United States, the majority, telling us that we need to be looking at a judge from the 1600s who is famous for overseeing the trials of women who were accused of being witches and hung for being witches, which he oversaw and sentenced women to death and instructed juries that witches are real because the scripture told him so. This is a man who said that women cannot be raped by their husbands because women are property, and property, of course, cannot be subject to rape or violation of bodily integrity. And yet his name appears over and over in an opinion in 2022. And that's where we are. Unashamed, unabashedly, this is a court that is looking to go all out to institutionalize racism and white supremacy, misogyny, and complete patriarchal control over society, a patriarchal control exercised through the evisceration of abortion rights that forces people into a patriarchal determination as to the future of their lives to affect millions and millions of women and trans men and non-binary people, because it's the patriarchy that demands how people must live, express themselves, and whether they can control their own destiny and their own humanity. So this is also a court that is seeking to go even further to institutionalize the rights of capital over the rights of workers, and really the power of capital over the rights of workers. And they are looking to roll back really about 100 years of court rulings. If you think about like the Supreme Court as an institution, it's an institution that up until the end of the Civil War, over and over again, was a pro-slavery court that was over and over again issuing rulings about the right of enslavers to enslave humanity, to enslave Black people. And as its great thinkers on the Supreme Court, the all-knowing, all-powerful Supreme Court, completely pro-slavery. After the Civil War, it worked to try and fight back and roll back all the legislative enactments of Reconstruction that were then giving Black people, formerly enslaved people, and free Black people recognized rights in the United States. And that's what the Supreme Court did, was dismantle Reconstruction era laws that would have really changed society in an amazing way and in a powerful way for liberation. And then they were an extreme anti-labor, pro-business court, something that never really let up, but began to sort of step back in the 1930s with that court of that era and its rulings with regard to Roosevelt era New Deal laws and progressive laws for workers and other progressive enactments of the New Deal era. This court wants to take us back really to the late 20s, 100 years ago. And it's the court working in conjunction with a right-wing effort in the United States to impose patriarchy and white supremacy on the population and try and stranglehold it. And they're doing that through these state legislatures that are extremist in dozens of states at this point, and with the efforts to try and empower the state legislatures to control the electoral votes. They want to cement and solidify that. And while relying on the right-wing federal Supreme Court to then sort of roll back any positive legislative enactments that come either through Congress, which, as we know, Congress is mainly just sitting on its hands and fighting each other, or ones that come through progressive state legislatures. So it's really just a means to an end right now for this court. And anyone who's in this struggle, anyone who's watching this struggle, has to know that on the other side of it, things are going to look very different. And it's going to be up to us to decide, what does our society look like on the other side of this? This is a fight and a struggle unlike anything in our lifetimes. This is a struggle that is fundamentally, the outcome will involve a fundamental remaking of American society. And it will either be that society is remade in a way to punish and repress and shut down the fight for liberation in the United States, or it will be the opportunity in the moment where we change society and we make society the society that we know that it can be, that it has the resources to be, a society that recognizes human liberation, that supports people and gives people what they need to survive and beyond what they need to survive, where laws are enacted to protect people's rights, not to restrict and criminalize people. And it's a fight where really nobody can be on the sidelines. It's not the kind of situation which I think sometimes folks look at what's happening and think, well, you know, it's a pendulum swing and it goes this way and it goes that way. And if we just kind of wait it out, it will end up going back to something that maybe we didn't love, but is kind of okay. We're not there. Right now, this is going to be a fight that determines really everything in terms of how our lives are going to be in this country. And obviously also affecting countries around the planet. I mean, you can't separate any one struggle from any other struggle. And like was being said by prior speakers, the issue of the fight for liberation and intersectionality have to go hand in hand. I mean, when we're fighting for climate justice, you can't fight for climate justice in just one place. You have to fight for climate justice everywhere. And when you fight for climate justice, how do you disentangle that from the right of Indigenous people? And how do you disentangle that, or why would you, of course, from an anti-racism struggle, because they're all together? And how does any of this become disentangled? Because of course it can't be and it shouldn't be from the fight for bodily integrity, for abortion rights, for women's rights, for the rights of the LGBTQ plus community. This is crucial. And understanding that we don't want to be disentangled, that we need to be together to fight, that we have to be together to fight for racial justice, for women's rights, for LGBTQ rights, for every struggle coming together as one fight, because the Supreme Court and the right wing know that. When you look at what they're trying to dismantle over the last 100 years, that's the 100 years of struggle of progressive change in the United States, the labor movement, the civil rights movement, the anti-war movements, the LGBTQ movement, the women's rights movement, and the climate justice movement. These have been the fights of the last 100 years that have been succeeding, that have changed the consciousness in American society. And the court has followed because it's been forced to follow. And now they have decided that they are going to put the brakes on the powerful force of human liberation that is surging forward. And it's up to all of us to be able to say that you can't put the brakes on. And in fact, it's an accelerant. The right wing actually has now created the dismantlement of these institutions. Interestingly enough, it's really coming from the right wing in the end, that they are actually dismantling these institutions that have so long actually served them in many, many ways. And yet, because they are so bold and so extreme, they have created a delegitimacy and a destruction that, again, it's up to us to decide what gets built and what we're going to have moving forward. And I want to just say again, I'm really happy to be here. I really wish I could be with you in person and see everyone. But thank you to the People's Forum for hosting this. And I am grateful to everyone who's in this together in the struggle.
Thank you so much, Mara, for being with us. It's good to see you, even if we don't get to hug you and exchange in person. So we are short in time, but we are going to allow space for 2 to 3 questions, Mia. All right, so if folks have any questions or comments, Mia is going to run the mic towards you. There's one person here. And then one person.
Hello, everyone.
There's one person there.
Should I stand or can I sit?
If you want to stand.
I will sit. I am disabled, so it's easier for me to sit.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here for today. It's been eye-opening, a lot of the things that I've been hearing. But some things that stuck into my mind specifically, something that you said, Kai, about New York being thought of as like a safe haven for these kind of liberation movements and these kind of progressive thoughts. But I am a first-gen Jamaican woman. I was raised mostly in South Brooklyn, went to school in South Brooklyn, and I feel like, and this is my friend here, we actually have discussed this, and maybe I'm wrong about this, who knows, but how I feel is that when New York is thought of as a safe haven, we forget about a lot of the right-wing movements and people that reside in South Brooklyn. Most of the racism that I have faced growing up in Brooklyn as a dark-skinned, unambiguous Black woman has been in South Brooklyn, in the predominantly white schools that I've gone to in South Brooklyn. I've always had to navigate corporate spaces as one of the only or few Black people around, women, man or otherwise. And again, these people would be from New York. And again, these are the people who were raised, grown in South Brooklyn. And I feel like the more influx of people, like you said, coming here for safe and legal abortions, which is good, they need that support. But at the same time, I really feel that puts a battery in the back of these racist people who live in South Brooklyn, in Long Island. I mean, just last night, we were discussing a Proud Boys and Our Lives Matter movement that happened in front of a Black bakery in Bed-Stuy. These people, all throughout Trump's elections, all the things that were happening in Staten Island and in Long Island, for these people to show that, nah, we racist and we here. Don't think it's safe to be out here. So I feel like the more progressive that we push in this fight, we must keep an eye on New York, states like New York that feel like us, or cities like New York City that feel safe, because there are people watching and are going to retaliate in these spaces. So I think that we must keep that in our heads when we talk about these movements and think about New York as this safe haven. So that's one of the things I wanted to say. And another thing, that Rachel also talked about a lot too, and also the last speaker, sorry, her name is slipping my mind, but I do feel that there's a lot of work to be done when it comes to BIPOC solidarity. Like you spoke about the anti-Blackness within Indigenous spaces and having to rely on Indigenous folks for our climate justice, for the knowledge in the environment. It's so important, it's so true. But something that has been on my mind a lot lately is we talked about, these fights being intersectional and being global. And something I've noticed a lot when we talk about climate justice and Indigenous folks is the lack of Black Indigenous faces who've also taken care of the land. Like I said, I'm Jamaican, and a third and often unspoken about Native group in the islands are the Maroons, who managed to escape in Jamaica. I'm again going to speak specifically in Jamaica, but you can see them in Dominica too and across the Caribbean. But they managed to escape before slavery was really established in the island, and escape to the Blue Mountains in Jamaica, and were given their sovereignty. And I've been taking care of the land ever since. But right now, that sovereignty is under attack. They're trying to take their land away. And these are the conversations that I don't see happening when we're talking about Indigenous climate justice. So I think what you said is so important. We need to have those talks around our histories being so similar, and our colonizers, while our histories are similar, we do have differences. It's so similar. We have way more in common than we have in differences. And I feel like it's so important for us to be intersectional in this way. So that's what I had to say.
So we're going to take the comments, and then we're going to close off with the panelists. And there's two over there, and those are the last two we'll take.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anthony. Even when we protest, okay, they're still trying to show how they can control us, okay? They tell us where to put the buses, okay? They tell us where they want us to rally at, okay? They want to show complete control, okay? We need to let them know that we're in control of our destinations, okay? And that we're not going to sit back and take it anymore, okay? The reality of it is that we need to find out what poisons the people that we are voting into office, okay? What are they doing that draws them to the other side, that they can't help us anymore? Okay, we need to put the people in office that we know are going to work with us and not against us. Okay, we need to put the buses on Pennsylvania Avenue and let them suffer while we come out with the signs and let them know what the real deal is. Okay. We don't have to do it on the White House. We don't have to do it on the Capitol. Little old Pennsylvania Avenue, just block it up with the buses, okay? Get the signs out. Let them know we in control. And we move them buses when we ready to move them, okay? So y'all keep in contact with me.
Thank you. We gonna call you as soon as we ready to block some stuff. We got two more, and we're gonna finish with those two interventions in the back.
Okay. Hi. First, thank you all so much for speaking with us today. I really enjoyed it. I have a question. So something that got brought up, and it's something that really lingers in my mind a lot when I think about like organizing and working with other groups, is knowing that like, even in, and this is touching on what you said too, even in BIPOC movements, there is still a lot of anti-Blackness, and that can be really hard in trying to build community and organize when you know that's underlying. So I guess a question I have, and this can also be extended to like your own identity, because of course there's anti just against BIPOC, but how do you sort of reconcile knowing that there's this underlying like anti-Blackness that exists, even though politically you do agree on the same things, but knowing that like ultimately Black people do have, in my opinion, I guess like an additional sort of layer of barriers that do exist even in these movements? And how do you really work to kind of bring that to the forefront and make sure that's centered as we do fight for all of these other rights that are being lost? So that's my question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. This was an incredible panel, and I think you all really made it so clear that abortion rights are critical in all of our struggles for Black liberation, Native liberation, women's liberation, trans liberation, and workers' liberation in general. I was hoping if you all could uplift some organizing that's happening across states and across, borders and countries, because I think you raised, the importance also of us learning from our family and comrades in other states and organizing with them, the importance of learning from comrades and family outside of the country, these popular movements that we're seeing in Latin America that have won abortion rights. So if y'all could just take some space to uplift that, because I think it's what builds our optimism and gives us a vision for our fight here as well.
Thank you, Gabriela. And if we don't have Kirby speak, I'm afraid that she might just protest. Right. So if she got a question, you better take that question. Damn.
Comrades know me so well. Hi, everyone. My name is Kirby. I want to thank our amazing panelists for all the knowledge that they dropped. Something that's coming into my head is, Bell Hooks said, I came into theory because I was hurting. And I think this is like a very real moment for us as organizers or whatever people here identify as politically to understand that we're in a real moment where true intersectionality will bring movement. And while people are scared, I'm hyped right now for this movement, right? We're not building a movement, we're already there, we're in it, right? And I think it's very important for us to understand that we have power to drive our liberation forward. Something that I believe Mara said was that the Supreme Court had to move because the people moved them. And so now if we're talking about liberation, we have to move towards liberation in a real serious way with all our talents, with all our abilities. If people here organize on the ground, let's go out to the community right now. If people here draw, if people here make things, if people here write, do it for our struggle. Do it for what we're doing. And I appreciate the panelists bring everything together. This is one braid. We're not a strand flowing anywhere. We're one braided struggle, one braided movement, right? And this issue impacts all of us. And they know that it impacts all of us. And they're afraid of impacted people coming together because history has shown what happens when we do. And so something I want to ask to the panelists is, what are the next steps? What's in the works? What are we doing? Where's the coalition at? Let me know. But that's my question to y'all. Thank you.
All right, Kirby. All right, so this is the time where the panelists give us all the answers before we go block some streets. With Anthony.
I am so excited. I'm excited. I'm a little overwhelmed, but I can't speak to what we can do. I can only speak to what Indigenous Women Rising has done in terms of trying to have hard conversations about anti-Blackness in our communities. I don't know if anyone has ever seen those memes where it's like, hold on, sweetie, mommy's bullying the mayor. We do that with our tribal leaders because our tribal leaders are mostly men, cishet men, and my mother-in-law just told me yesterday that one of our traditional leaders brought up abortion during ceremony and was like talking about the sanctity of life and like all of this stuff, and has a history of being anti-Black and knows that the kind of work that we do and who we do this work with, which is primarily led by Black folks. And in our Pueblo communities, there's a long history of the Spanish bringing their their slaves through New Mexico and trying to enslave the Pueblo peoples. And so we have this like very long history that's very geographically centered, I guess. And so it's really holding our tribal leadership accountable because it's very rare that we see our own Black Indigenous folks within leadership positions. And so just like trying to figure out what makes sense for our community and how are we trying to get our leadership to acknowledge that. And that's like a long-term thing. The other thing about uplifting other orgs, Pueblo Action Alliance has been one of our biggest partners in climate justice, and they help us with reproductive justice and having conversations about land sovereignty, body sovereignty, the need to talk about the connection between missing and murdered Indigenous women, oil and gas exploitation, especially in the Four Corners area that primarily impacts Diné or Navajo people and some Pueblo communities, air quality, water quality, the fact that our girls are raped and left in the desert for their families to never find again, and lack of support for survivors of sexual assault. So, and we're also working with Yucca, and I'm so sorry I forget what Yucca stands for, but it's an organization led by migrant youth who work on environmental justice. So I wanted to uplift those two. And what are we doing now? We're just paying for abortions.
Okay. So many different questions and comments. Yes, brother, man. When we're ready to blockade, we're going to call you. We're going to tap you up for sure. One thing that we know, though, as New Yorkers, New York City, organizing in New York City is a lot different than organizing in other places. I've nationally organized. They don't have the same response, repressiveness, violence that we have here in New York City when you organize in DC. You don't face the same methods of response. And so there's the reality as organizing on the ground is that you're dealing with the largest police force in the world that trains other police forces globally across the world. But people cannot be afraid, and I don't think the people are afraid. And I appreciate Kirby's excitement for this moment of reckoning. I think that's a little bit of what Mara was talking about, right? That this is a moment of reckoning for us to come together. One of the things I love is the influence of resistance. As a historian that I point to talking about Jamaica is the Maroon people, Cudjoe, the Maroon leader, right? Before, when they turn up in the 1700s in Jamaica, the reason why the English are so willing to make a deal with Cudjoe and allow the Maroons to go is because Robert Hunter was the governor of New York during the rebellion of 1712. That was the first organized Black rebellion here in New York City. And so Governor Hunter had just experienced a Black turn-up rebellion here in New York City in 1712. He's now sent to Jamaica, and Cudjoe's turning up. And he's like, bruh, I don't want no problems. I'm going to just let you have this land. So the language of resistance has traveled and travels with our people throughout, right? And so I just wanted to bring that up, that like the Maroonish culture, what we had in the early 1700s here in the States, and a lot of what we know about for resistance in New York City is that New Yorkers were being turned up by folks who were coming from the West Indies. It was like, y'all are a little bit too casual with your enslavement. Right? Like that was part of what was happening. So the history of resistance flows through our people through and through. It doesn't matter where we are, we're gonna turn up. In regards to organizing within spaces that you know to be anti-Black and dealing with that, I moved from abolitionist PIC organizing to climate justice movements very directly and had to deal with being tokenized, et cetera, as the Black organizer for climate justice. What it is that at the end of the day is that my liberation is tied up in everybody else's liberation. And so I have to keep my eye on the prize in that sense that I'm fighting towards liberation. I know that it looks a lot different for what it means for my Black folks to be able to own their community garden in their neighborhood, what that looks like for Black folks in terms of us having that level of liberation. But I also know that, for example, Harriet didn't do it on her own. Harriet had white people paying the way, right? You had to depend on other people throughout the Underground Railroad as a strategy, right? It wasn't something that was just like turned up. There weren't flyers for the Underground Railroad, right? Nobody was doing a little Canva graphic telling Harriet, where's where we're gonna be at, right? We had to really organize and depend on each other and lead to a lot of trust. She was trusting she was trusting enslaved folks who were running away to white people across this country, right, to get us to freedom in Canada. Because niggas weren't coming to New York. Niggas was moving through New York. We were trying to get to Canada. We can go on a history lesson later. But I say all that to say that we don't get free on our own. And that just like has to consistently be the thing that will keep you being willing to work and trust and work with other people. Because if you allow this notion of heaviness, of the extra chip on my shoulder, you will get tied up in that interpersonal bullshit, and liberation will fall to the wayside. And a lot of our left movements, our liberal movements, has gotten caught up and got caught sleeping because we're caught up in that dynamic of interpersonal bullshit that, like, really right now at this point of legalization and where we're fighting, the urgency that we have to move with, that doesn't have to be left behind, but there's a time and a place. And liberation is really being put on the back burner because of all these different side conversations, while the right and the white are moving forward with their plan for white supremacy. Because racism and white supremacy doesn't really care about any damn body. It doesn't even care about the white people that it helps to, purport to support. And so we just have to be able to move beyond that. Lastly, what I'll say is I love to always quote Miriam Kaba whenever I'm able to. And Miriam Kaba on June 24th tweeted these things to consider. And so I'll leave you with this. 1, get educated. Identify resources and tools. Number 2, don't argue with people on the internet. Number 3, process your feelings, maybe over tea or dessert. 4, connect, gather with others. Number 5, develop a concrete and specific plan of action and include protests if you can participate in doing so. And so those are like 5 hardcore tips from Miriam Kaba that's like, hey, this is how we're going to respond in this moment. She tweeted this out on June 24th. And she identifies obviously 100% abolitionist, 100% pro-abortion, self-determination, and human rights. And I think that if we get that as our framework of moving forward, that this is, I'm 100% on bodily autonomy, on self-determination, and human rights. It's like, what are you advocating for? What are you organizing for? So just keep that in mind.
I think trust is earned.
Mm-hmm.
Trust is earned, and it's lost, and for the people who are really about it, it can be regained, and that process is up and down, and that's what relationships are. So I think that's something that is actually, I do think, universal, because within your culture and within different cultures and all of that, you show who you are in your actions. And we're trying to build a movement, not of just like that flyer that says, but of people who really know each other, who have experiences with each other, who have struggled alongside each other, who've defended each other, who have had each other's backs. And those things aren't built just like overnight or because we're holding a sign together. It's built through time and through relationships. And I want to thank the People's Forum, because that is the space. The People's Forum is a space for us to keep building with each other across all these different issues that are happening, that are affecting our communities, where we get to learn about each other, build with each other, fight alongside each other, grow together, teach each other, and build the kind of movement that we need. And the last thing I want to say in terms of the movements in Latin America is that what they had right, even though things were criminalized and the situation is even worse, our people have organized through outright dictatorships if they need to be. But if they have a strategy for what are they trying to achieve, and if that strategy is liberation. And so the difference between our movements, our NGO movements here, and the popular feminism that's been happening in Latin America is that their strategy is the people. The people have the power, and let's organize the people. Whereas the strategy of the NGOs has been these elected officials are the friends in high places. We need a seat at the table. We don't want to upset our friends at this. Okay, so they believe that they have the power, and that has led to this point. We have a different strategy. We have a different goal, and that should be what guides us through this struggle and throughout.
Hey, y'all. I just want to first say thanks, Anthony, again, for reminding us whose streets these are, because they're very much so ours, not all those people. Whose streets? Our streets. Whose streets? Our streets. I wanted to start off on the anti-Blackness comment, because as a Black woman navigating RJ reproductive justice spaces, there are usually white feminists as fuck. I'm like, I can just leave. And then I'm like, no, I can't leave. So a lot of people on the panel already made a lot of great points. Another thing I like to do, which might be petty in itself, is take up as much space as possible. There's a lot of these panels and things that I used to just not go to and stay at home, or I would belittle my work that I was doing on the ground because I knew these conversations were being had amongst fucked up people that had a lot of resource and a lot of money, or didn't understand that people needed agency over what we were providing. They didn't understand that folks needed access that was 24 hours that we were taking to people. They didn't understand that we were mobilizing things that folks needed and couldn't get to. So a lot of the times I would just, I'm not gonna have this conversation. These people are bigger than me. They're saying it in a different way. And then I thought, the way that queer feminist Black folks are organizing is what's saving lives, like that, letting people keep their integrity and their autonomy over their lives and not assuming they need a savior when they need help. They can still retain agency. Like, we don't have those same barriers. We make it a point not to have that. And so I do come into more spaces, especially white feminist spaces, and take up as much space as possible. I talk longer than everyone in there. I talk about my services way more. And I advocate for Black women, Black, queer, and trans folks way more unapologetically, because if I have to show up as myself, I want to exist as my full self. And I do feel like that's part of the movement, is showing up as me, existing as myself. And I want to take it or leave it. But I will say that wanting perfection from anyone that you're genuinely trying to do movement work with is dehumanizing. So I do hold space for people being on a journey, but I do in that same token still do my whole self, my whole work is still very much so present. And so as someone that's claiming to want to learn, they should be open to what I'm saying or the issues that I'm bringing up. In terms of what's next at Yellowhammer Fund, y'all, I'm in Alabama. What we've done well is built community, and so we're already on the ground, which is a good thing, because a lot of the risk associated, let me say this as my personal self, a lot of the risk that's associated is with documentation. So one of the good things is that we're already on the ground. We're doing a lot of preventative work, which is a necessary thing. We're making sure that people can get to the resources. And then we're looking at going to rural parts of the South and touching people that, folks usually leave out and forget about. So yeah, I think that's it. Thanks, y'all.
So just to conclude with some words, I think we are all in agreement that we are in a very decisive moment in history. We agree with that. All right. And that brings a lot of urgency to what we must do. Do we agree with that? Throughout history, nothing has been given to poor working class people. Point blank, nothing. We have had to break laws. It was legal to enslave people. It was legal for Hitler to commit the atrocities he committed. Criminalization of poor and Black people, of brown and Black women, has been the basis of the capitalist society in which we live. We are dealing with a court system that is patriarchal, that is white supremacist, and that is classist. Do we agree with that? That shit ain't new. It's not news. It is not just newly discovered that we're dealing with this. What this decisive moment brings us to is whether we will bend to their will or will we not. And if we do this at this time and decide to bend, you best believe that we will digress 100 years. And our children and our children's children and our nephews and nieces will have to endure harsher times than the ones that we currently live in. That is the moment in which we are living today. And this will be expanded beyond the borders of the United States, because we have seen historically how the United States, be it Democrat or Republican, moves. Do we agree with that? So the question is, will we bend? Will we bend? Will we bend? That means that we will not bend, even if it means breaking the law. Now, I'm not telling you to go out there and do what Anthony suggested, but if Anthony calls me tomorrow, I'm there. You feel me? All right. So we're going to get ready to have more activities for the day. Make sure you check out the exhibit. Culture is at the heart and center of the work that we are trying to do. We're not only trying to shift politics, we are trying to shift culture. We live in a culture that is not meant to promote the values and principles that we need. And to the question of what do we need now, we need a broad coalition based on values and principles that are divorced from the capitalist system that we know. And that means struggle. That means struggling through all the divisions that have been historically made for us, whether that be race, whether that be gender, whether that be, and I'm going to include this because there are some people who have money who commit class suicide. Those are the folks that I like. Every Marx needs an Engel. Anyway. Thank you all for being here. I hope y'all talk to each other. I hope we build with each other. There's a whole lot of work that we are in need to do. Who's taking the list for the open mic? Saidi over there, my Jamaican sister, will be taking a list. Make sure you walk around and you check out the exhibit, which is a beautiful exhibit of people expressing their rage, but also their love for the people. And there's a workshop that's happening upstairs on what do we need to build and in which historical context we're doing it. Thank you all so much for being here.